On Target Institute presents a teaching from the Men on Target small group curriculum. Now with today's session, On Target founder Vince D'Acchioli.
Hello men, how you doing? And welcome to our review and growth keys for Module 5. Now, let me remind you, please go to the website if you haven't already and download the handouts for this session because there's some strategic information you're going to need to have in front of you. There's a place for you to write down key prayer points for the men in your group and areas they may still be struggling with as a result of these sessions. And there's a place for you to really review and rate yourself on how you're doing in sessions 33 through 40 as we unpacked all those teachings. This session will be reviewing the high points for you to consider as we move forward. And guys, the reason we do this at the end of every module it's because we're finding in doing this now for the last 15 years that it's good to stop every now and then and go back and review and rehearse with our guys to make sure that we're living up to the promises we made perhaps weeks ago to get better in these various areas. So I really pray that this will help you to review and really be committed to making the changes God is calling you to make. Module 5, Growth Keys. And in these sessions, we covered A Man and His Legacy by my friend Craig Glass. We talked about a man and his extended family, a man and his friends, and then the last 4 sessions, 2 on a man and his time, and 2 on a man and his money. So let's get right into it. With Craig from Peregrine Ministries, he really shared with us out of Proverbs 13:22. He started out of the Message translation. It says, a good life gets passed on to the grandchildren. Guys, let me also say that a bad life gets passed on to the grandchildren as well. And I think Craig made that very, very clear, that we're passing on a legacy. What kind of a legacy will it be? That was really the question that Craig posed to us. We receive an inheritance from our parents and grandparents and sometimes foster parents, whatever the role models were in our life, and we pass on a legacy to others, to our children and to our grandchildren, and it's transformation in our lives that ultimately determine what legacy we'll be passing on to other people. And Craig had some really powerful illustrations about his own family and how they used to accumulate a lot of junk in their backyard, and the city finally came to them and said, you can't do that anymore. And I think they said something like, well, we don't know what to do. We've never not accumulated junk. It's just what we do. And of course, that's a powerful illustration of the stuff that we do in our own life. Sometimes we just accumulate junk. We don't realize the impact that it could be having on other people. So it's what we receive from our soil that determines what we pass on. And Craig talked about what he received in growing up in his early family days and how important it is for us to take the negative things and cut them off so that we don't pass them on to future generation. Our legacy, he went on to say, is transformed by 2 important things. 1, by taking on the attitude of Jesus and pursuing genuine community. And guys, I am so happy. I'm preaching to the choir here, obviously, because most of you who are watching this are pursuing genuine community. I really want to commend you for that. Very important that you understand that true transformation cannot take place outside of a community. It takes a community. It takes an environment where other men are rubbing shoulders with you in order for you truly to be transformed. In the next session, session 35, I started dealing with a man and his extended family. I sometimes refer to it as in-laws or outlaws, and you may remember that. A man and his extended family. One of the biggest problems we face in our relationship with God and our spouse comes from unresolved family relationships. The Bible says to leave and cleave. We tend to leave physically, but not emotionally sometimes. The Bible also says to honor your father and mother. So there's really a struggle here sometimes. In Ephesians, honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. It means, to honor means to attach high value. The word there is kabed. Very important important. And then surely you remember me talking to you about our extended family and the whole Aunt Margie issue. We all have them. We all have those characters in our family that we go, oh my gosh, here we go. It's time for the family to get together around Thanksgiving or Easter or Christmas time, and you have to deal with that person in your family that's a little bit dysfunctional, and it's like, whoa. But we talked about the importance of, as a Christian, not really having that kind of an attitude. In fact, there are three things that you need to consider. If you're finding yourself in that position with either your earthly moms or dads or with extended family members, do an attitude audit and ask yourself the question, do I have the attitude of Jesus toward these people? And then second, pray for and seek an opportunity to restore. God will give you opportunities to restore those relationships and really be a blessing. And then third thing is to use your gifts to bless them. I shared the illustration of how I did that with my two nephews when they were young boys, and how I was able to go to them and encourage them and bless them by using the gifts of discernment and other things that God had given me. These are important things for us to remember as Christians. And then in session 36, you remember a man and his friends. Very important ideas here. Proverbs 18:24 says, a man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. And we talked about the friend test and how a good friend is a friend who has commitment toward the relationship, who is willing to correct us. He brings correction, encouragement, protection, and strength. Those 5 key things. And we had Bible verses that went with all of those, and I would encourage you to go back and review those verses and to ask yourself the tough questions about how are you doing with your friends. And perhaps you had this discussion in your group a while back. Well, today, as you watch this and as we conclude this in just a few moments, you'll have an opportunity to go back and rehearse with the guys in your group, how are you doing in cultivating and seeking out the kind of friends that are important for you to have. And remember, we also talked about how wrong friends can corrupt. And I shared with you a little bit about my own story and what happened in my own life, and how devastating that can be to surround ourselves with the right friends. And then in sessions 37 and 38, we talked about a man and his time, part 1 and part 2, and how important it is to understand the difference between efficiency and effectiveness. The story of Larry that went ahead and redid the entire corporate manual. Now here I am, his boss, and I didn't even know he was doing it. That's kind of a reflection on my management back in those days. It wasn't that great. I was not helping Larry to be more effective. I was allowing him to use his efficiency. And he got to a place where it was more form over substance. What he did was incredible. The efficiency he applied and what he produced was wonderful. But when I really asked Larry, why did you do this? He just said, well, it looked like it had to be done. And he wasn't evaluating whether or not that was the best use of his time. So he was efficient without being effective. And we discovered in managing our time that it's the enemy's plan. The enemy's plan, and we shared about how he really wants there to be an unordered people. So all the distractions and things that hit us are all there. Because ultimately he wants an unordered people to lead to an unordered world, a world where people cannot find God. The enemy does not want us to find God, and he uses all these distractions and our inability to plan our time properly in order to create that. The result? Life is managing you. It's not a lack of time. We talked about it's a lack of vision. We don't have any clear priorities and goals. And if there's no long-term vision, why bother to plan? In part 2, we unpack the solution. Ephesians 5:16 says, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. It goes on to say in Ephesians, be very careful then how to live, not as unwise, but as wise. So the solution, live wisely, making good use of your time, and know the Lord's will. And of course, the key here is the vision part, knowing the Lord's will, because the strategy for living is God's vision, clear goals, and established priorities, and careful planning. And then in part 2, as we concluded that one, a man and his money, the financial difficulties, are the number one cause of marriage failure. We talked about symptoms of financial bondage. This was in part 1. And how no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. And we talked about the 10 steps to financial freedom. Okay, remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth. And then finally, in this session, we talked about the importance of understanding the roles between husbands and wives and how important it is to make the right decisions together. The argument that it's my money, no, it's not, it's your money, it's my money, that is not a good argument. It should be our money. We need to be working together as husbands and wives. And you remember that I also encourage you to make those kind of financial decisions together. It's very important that you do that, and don't step out on your own. Be on the same page before you make important financial decisions. Very important for your relationship. So, life application here. Again, you've got your study notes in front of you. Really begin to drill down now on your prayer and commitment cards. On a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing with your legacy? Have you really been able to do some things differently as a result of that teaching? Are you looking at what the things are that you've inherited from your past that you may be inadvertently passing on to your children? I know for me, I discovered some of those things during that teaching, and I had to go back to my family and ask for forgiveness in a few of those areas. And when a man and his friends, how are your friends lining up in those 5 different areas, and how do you line up as a friend? On a scale of 1 to 5, how are you doing? A man and his time and a man and his money. Begin to look back at those teachings and ask yourself the tough questions. I made a commitment when we went through those teachings that I was going to do these things. And right now, in front of the men in your group, how are you doing in terms of processing those ideas for the future? And one, I'm sorry, that I left out of there was a man and his extended family. I'm sorry, that should be in there as well. But a man and his extended family as well. Ask yourself the tough questions. How am I doing? And discuss it with the men in your group. I hope God really shows up and blesses your time together as a group of guys. And until next time, guys, don't forget about it.